No matter where you come from, no matter where you're going, here's a place where you can take comfort in the knowing that whether if you've come to stay a while or just passing through, this door is open to you. Come and let's be silent. Come and share a hug. Come, let's pray together. Come, love and be loved.
There's an introduction for you. Are you going to flip that for me? Or do it? And it's I like hearing John Gilmore talk. And even if he was not talking about one of the universal laws or a combination of the laws or an aspect of the laws, with every single part, it'd be worth coming for the music. Very good, always is. All of you may not be football fans, but I'm going to use football as an example. All right? You can apply this to anything. If you go to a football game, you just see a bunch of big old guys running around, banging into each other, getting in the huddle, running up to the line, banging into each other, and so on, right? If you've never seen a game before. What makes a football game? It's the rules of the game. Now what if you only had negative rules, say like the Ten Commandments? Thou shalt not line up off sides, thou shalt not slip, thou shalt not grab the headgear. You wouldn't know a lot, would you? Jesus sort of brought the forward pass and the rollout, how to score. But you can go to a football field and you take your baseball bat and glove and play all day long and you won't be playing football. Because what makes football is the rules of the game. Why we don't think about that when it comes to life is hard for me to understand. Some people look at life and say, that's the way things are. You got to learn to live the way things are to survive. You got to go with the flow. Other people have questions all the time. You're going all the way back to Pythagoras and all the way down through time. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What's going on? What's going on? And sometimes, especially when we're younger, like in our 20s in particular, you know, we feel things more acutely. And we want answers. And I happened to be about 20 years old when I went to Vietnam with the Church of Christ mission program in 1966. I ended up staying 4.5 years. And a strange thing happened there because I was going to the University of Saigon School of Living Language studying Chinese. We either had to study Chinese, Vietnamese, or Monyard, and I studied Chinese. And so I wanted to establish rapport with my fellow students. These were Chinese students. And I started reading the Analects of Confucius and Tao Te Ching or Dhammapada, different famous books. And I kept finding these little passages. And I'd go back and I'd read that to my wife, who was there with me. And I'd say, who do you think said that? And she said, Jesus. I said, no, that was Buddha. And then I'd find something else and I'd go back and read it to my wife. I'd say, who do you think said that? And she'd say, Jesus, I guess. And I said, no, that was Lao Tzu. About the third or fourth time I did that, she said, I don't want to hear this. She was picking up on things that I wasn't even picking up on. And began to realize that what I was over there trying to do and teach was not so unique. That this has been taught a long time. I mean, and I really got obsessed with this. I wanted answers. I was demanding answers. Now, what happens for most of us is we get a little bit jaded by life and we forget to ask the questions. Why am I here? What's going on? Right? Now, there's been, I don't know why I'm so that's kind of, you may not be able to see it. I'm not equating Maharishi or Charles Fillmore with Jesus or with Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes is the founder of Science of Mind. And when you leave today, there's a 7-page definitions and statements that Ernest Holmes gave about each of these 13 universal laws. Right? He talks about them a lot more than I do. I'm a little bit leery of going into a great deal of detail on each law. You know what happens to the caterpillar who gets helped, right? You can never have the strength. You realize the monarch butterfly, I just found this out not too long ago, monarch butterfly flies every year from Canada to Mexico. The butterfly. What would give a butterfly that kind of power? It's coming from its own struggle. It has to do it itself. So these universal principles, these rules of the game of life, just like football, the rules of the game of life are things that we have to find for ourselves. Nobody can do it for you. There's no shortcut. There's no metamorphosis by osmosis. We have to do it ourselves. And if we don't have the desire to know, if we'd rather just go with the flow, that's up to us. And once we identify and verify each of these principles, it's still up to us to find the harmony and the balance to stay within those principles. Now, the great teachers like Jesus, Buddha, and others had a tendency to stress one principle over another. When Jesus was asked, now they taught all 13. And I know there's 13 because each one of the 13 is connected to the other 12. When you find something that you call a principle and it doesn't connect to them, it's not one of the universal laws. And Jesus said in Matthew 13:35, you can look this up yourself, he gave the only very definitive reason for coming. Even though most people talk about Jesus like he's dead man walking, he just came down here to die. But that's not what he said. Matthew 13:35, he said, I came to reveal the secrets that have lain hidden from the foundations of the earth. He actually reiterates that in front of Pilate. The only thing that he says when they're interrogating him, he says, I came to reveal these truths. Now, in the same verse, Matthew 13:35, it says, and he spoke with them in parables, and without parables spoke he not. So if he was speaking only in parables, then obviously the secrets that had lain hidden from the foundation of the earth had to be in those parables. And when they did all the redactions and all the changes in the Bible that had taken place over a long period of time, especially beginning with the Nicene Creed, they had noted to redact that. So those secrets that have lain hidden from the foundation of the earth have remained there all the time for us. And all we have to do is identify that principle and verify it from our own life experiences. As long as you base your understanding of those principles from what I'm telling you, it's just faith, you just believe me. The guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But when you have identified and verified that principle for yourself, then you know it. And there's a lot of difference here than thinking about something or believing something and knowing something. Nobody can feed you a lie when you've been there and you've done it, right? There's nothing in your life that you've done that you know that anybody can fool you about. And this is learning the rules of the game of life. Now, Jesus kind of identified love as the most important because it's the unifying principle. I really think it's the unified field scientists are still looking for. But he said the most important was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. On the other hand, Buddhists tended to stress the law of evolution and unfoldment. He said, everything in the world changes, and all of our problems come from resisting that change. Pretty profound, isn't it? Lao Tzu tended to stress the law of balance and equalization. That is, the balance between heaven and earth, balance in our lives. That's the law of balance and equalization. Other teachers like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought transcendental meditation to the United States, I don't put necessarily on the same par, but he wrote a book called The Science of Being and the Art of Living. It's all about one law, the law of being, who we are. Charles Fillmore, some of you may know from Unity, founder of Unity, wrote a book called The 12 Powers of Man, which is the same thing. He's talking about the law of being, our innate powers. We come here to open heart, and you'll hear all of this. I've heard it today. A lot of what I'm talking about, I've heard somebody say something about it or perform it. The funny thing is, this is a statement by Lao Tzu. And thinking about him saying this at that time, and then think about what we know today. He says, the world is full of half-enlightened masters. I was bemused by that statement. Half-enlightened masters, overly clever, too sensitive to live in the real world. I'm a little hard trying to read it. They surround themselves with selfish pleasures and bestow their grandiose teachings upon the unwary, prematurely publicizing themselves, intent upon reaching some spiritual climax. They constantly sacrifice the truth and deviate from the top. What they really offer the world is their own confusion. That is why it is absolutely necessary, if we want to understand the rules of life, is that we identify and verify these principles for ourselves. Even Buddha said, don't believe everything I say. Jesus asked him, why don't you look for these things yourself? This is work we have to do. I've written 20 books and published them, and I get more response, more testimonials, and more thank yous for that one sheet of paper than those 20 books. And all it is doing it yourself. It's kind of an introduction to the process. Because things will start to happen. I say there are 4 pillars in this process. And the first is to identify the universal law. Identification, verification, observation, and meditation are the 4 pillars. And nobody can really help you do it. I'm going to give you some very brief definitions here. Ernest Holmes gives you much more. The 7 pages there you can see for yourself. And that's because of that monarch butterfly. I don't want to take you down the road and help you with this too much. I want to give you the basis because this is stuff you have to do yourself. Identification, I'm identifying them, I'm putting them there for you. But you may go in there and say, well, this isn't true for me, or that's not. Or you can do whatever you want. This is for you, not for me. But identify those principles. And the second part is to verify. Verify it with some specific life experience. Something that's happened to you. So that whenever you hear somebody mention that law or anything, you immediately think about what happened to you. And we do that all the time. You'll hear somebody talking about what kind of experience they had in their office or with their doctor or whatever, and you'll say, that happened to me. We're always doing that. So you need to be in the position to be able to do that. Observation is not just watching other people and watching yourself, but it is with some intensity. Think about when your child is trying to tell you something, and they may be crying or it's upset, or your friend is trying to tell you something. We are intently listening to what they have to say. Well, intently listen to yourself. Intently watch yourself. That's what is meant by observation. Meditation is the pulling of it all together. I tell people that I like 3 types of meditation. I do a visualization meditation at night before going to bed. That's seeing for myself, visualizing like I can see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, what I'm creating, what I'm doing. I like to do that at night because during the night we have 5 REM states, 5 times a night the inner being's talking to us. And we're not listening, for the most part. So when we go into the second type of meditation, which is contemplative meditation in the morning, some of these things come back up. You can start off by just taking one of these universal laws and thinking about it from your own experience. But these things will come back to us from the inner being talking to us. And that's the 4 pillars. Now, the universal principles, I'm going to give you this little, very, very brief definition if I can read it. But you take what Ernest Holmes has written there and look at it in more detail. Raina will give it to you on the way out. Unfortunately, I took those and had them photocopied. I asked them to staple them, and they didn't. So she's going to have to kind of look at it to give you each one. Universal law of being, I've already mentioned, this is the innate powers that we have, what we have because of the indwelling of God in man, our divine birthright. That's what makes us different. That's what tells us there's a reason for us to be here. You know, nothing happens without a reason. They used to think that the god of the underworld was what caused volcanoes, right? We come to find out there's a reason for that. Poseidon was blamed for the tidal waves and the tsunamis. Now we come to know there's a reason. And there's a whole lot of things in our lives that we think may be an accident. There's not any accidents. No such thing. There's a reason for it. Even when you have a car wreck, it's maybe because you're not paying attention, right? There's a reason. Universal law of absolute unity. We talk about that here. You've heard it say today, there's only one power in the universe. Yet the whole world, all of the churches that you go to, are going to be talking about 2 powers. God and his angelic forces in a battle with the devil and his demonic forces for the hearts and minds of man, right? There's an equal power there fighting against God. There's nothing comparable to God. When you have something like that, that's a concentration of fear and negativity. That's what that is. And we wrestle with it all the time. We live with it, fear. You know, we can be driving down the road and you're thinking about something that you've got to do, some incident that's coming up, and before you know it, you'll be looking at the worst possible thing that could happen. Don't we? And then once we realize there's really only one power in the universe, and then you have that second law there, the law of, this is the law of proper perspective, but there's the law of absolute unity, and then there's the law of pure potentiality that we talk about. Proper perspective simply means to get into a position where you can get all the facts. You know, they say that witnesses in a crime are the worst possible evidence. Because he's standing over there, and somebody's standing over there, and somebody over there, and somebody comes in and robs the place, everybody's got a different view, different picture. They like the forensic evidence. Nowadays, the DNA. But proper perspective is for us to get to a point high enough that we can see what we're really dealing with. That's the law of proper perspective. Then there's the universal law of pure potentiality, and that is the indwelling of God in man, which I was just talking about. Right? We can do virtually anything we want to do. There's some things that we are not as capable of as others. And there's obviously several ladies I've heard singing here who sound a whole lot better. All right. There's things that we can do, but we have that potentiality. Everything, including the trees outside, had to exist in somebody's mind first. Think about it. The musical instruments, the chairs, this machine that we're operating here, everything had to exist in somebody's mind before it could exist physically. Right? That's pure potentiality. Everything is the process of the unmanifested becoming manifested. That's the words of Deepak Chopra. I thought it was very good. Everything is the process of the unmanifested becoming manifested. Thought creates form. Without thought, there can be no form. That's pure potentiality. And the law of evolution and unfoldment. And it's too hard for me to read. The law of evolution and unfoldment is about growth and development. It's about the reason for our being here. I've been to some seminars and workshops lately where people talk about our purpose is to worship God, our purpose is to do this, our purpose is to do that. Our purpose is to identify and verify these principles. Our purpose is to learn the rules of the game of life. Our purpose is to find balance. Jesus called them the treasures that we lay up in heaven instead of earth, right? Because all we have, all we take with us, is what we've been able to believe, conceive, and understand the principles. And the universal law of balance and equalization. A lot of people, you hear it from the New Agers, you hear it from everybody talking about good karma and bad karma. There's no such thing as good karma and bad karma. Karma is just balance. And when we got out of balance, sometimes it's painful getting back into balance. That's the law of balance and equalization. And you don't believe that, you just go to any kind of club, any kind of situation. One person can come in there and destroy that balance and that harmony. One person. Or you can get up and have a bad day in the morning and mess up your whole day. The universal law of believing and knowing. And this is, I've already mentioned to some degree, but the churches have tended to put belief, raise belief above knowledge as being so important. But the fact is you can't separate the two. It's like two sides of a hand, two sides of a coin. You can have all the knowledge in the world if you don't have any faith to do anything with it, it isn't worth anything. And you can have all the faith in the world, and if it's in what somebody else has experienced, it hasn't much value for you. So that's the law of believing and knowing. And when you get Mr. Holmes's words on this, go into that a little bit deeper and look at that. If you want more, I have a book called The Core Teachings. It's not in printed form, it's in electronic form. But it's a book you can read like any other book. Or you can take out one of these laws and go see what the Vedic writers said about it, and then follow that strain and see what the Tao Te Ching said about it, what the Dhammapada said about it, what Jesus said about it, what Muhammad said about it. You can follow it all the way down to Napoleon Hill, Ralph Waldo Emerson, there's a number of you, and you can follow that strain all the way through. And I don't believe that you can follow that all the way through without attaching it to something that's happened to you, something in your experience. Universal law of attraction. Everybody's heard about the universal law of attraction. Half of you probably watched the movie The Secret. That was a little bit like giving you a 13-piece puzzle and holding back 12 pieces. Sometimes Deepak Chopra talks about the 7 universal laws. I don't know what he did with the other 6. But they are all attached, all interconnected. A lot of people talk about the law of attraction based on, I want to have a red Corvette, or I want this, that, and the other. There's a story about a guy who went to a law of attraction class, and they kept telling him about he could have anything he wanted. He decided he wanted a red Corvette. And so he put a picture of it on his refrigerator, put a picture of it all around where you could see that red Corvette. And he woke up about 2 o'clock one morning, and the guy had failed to make the corner and ended up in his living room in a red Corvette. You know, it's got to have to do with you, right? And if you really understand the law of attraction, you know it's not about attracting things, even though it works. It works that way too. But the law of attraction, the real meaning is the inner being draws to itself the experiences it requires in its process of evolution and unfolding. The real meaning, okay? And the universal law of abundance, so everybody is fighting over stuff like there's not enough of it. When that law of pure potentiality worked, there was no, you remember when the biggest company in the computer business was 3M? Where in the world did Microsoft come from? Out of nothing. Out of a thought. Thought creates form. Without thought there can be no form. All of these industries. Man, I can remember when I used to use a phone that looked like a brick with a thing sticking out of it. That was the first mobile phones. Right? And before that, you were scrounging around looking for a place to put your coin in. Right? And before that, there was, well, there was cables. There were letters. Abundance is there for us. Universal law of relativity, this is simply that everything is connected. You don't live in a vacuum. You'd be really surprised to know some of the things that you've said and what kind of effect you've had on people. Maybe even music you played and had such an effect on someone. You just do not operate alone. We're all interconnected. The universal law of giving and receiving, you recognize that from the affirmations that we are giving of our time, we're giving of our energy, we're giving of our knowledge. We're giving packets of love. You can't expect to get anything if you're not giving anything. I don't know a single successful man or woman that won't tell you they really had to put a lot into that business or that career to get back what they got back. There's no getting with no giving. This is a cycle. It goes on and on. And the law of righteous self-interest, a lot of people completely misunderstand and this one, and that is that they think it's being selfish. You get on an airplane, you start to go somewhere, and the little girl comes out there and tells you about the thing going to fall down and to put it over your mouth first before you try to put it over the kids. Yeah, of course. If you don't, how are you going to take care of the kids? All of these teachers, and you will read from Ernst as well, is that you have to take care of yourself. Hugging, that young lady talking about hugging herself, absolutely she needs to hug. We all need to hug ourselves and love ourselves and take care of ourselves, or we cannot take care of anybody else. We can't possibly give if we're not taking care of ourselves. And the last is the universal law of love, which we've already mentioned, that Jesus talking about being so important. And I really do feel like it's that unified field that Einstein's looking for. It's a very fine form of energy that connects everything. And that's why Jesus said it was the most important. What I'm trying to tell you today is that this is the most important thing you can possibly do in your life. You can accept that or reject it. It's not my job to monitor you and to push you and to insist on it. I'm just simply telling you, right? I'm sharing with you. That's the law of giving and receiving. I'm sharing it with you. Do with it what you will. But if you want to understand the rules of the game of life, you want to make things happen, you have to go through this process, and you have to do it yourself. not come out well that way. And I've already said that. All right. I want to close with just 3 promises. Okay? 3 promises. And listen to me on it. Because I am making this promise. This is self-verifiable. You don't need a master or guru. You don't need to contemplate your navel in a cave in Tibet. You don't need a psychiatrist. You don't need a minister. What you need is to take the time yourself, right, to self-verify. Verify each one of these laws from your own life experiences. And anybody can do that. Right? And the second promise I make you is you will never be walking down the street wondering what hit you. You're not going to be sitting in a coffee shop in a befuddled state. If you're in the coffee shop, you're enjoying your coffee and figuring out your next move, but it will not be because you don't know what's going on. If you've identified and verified those laws for yourself. And the final promise is, every time you hear somebody like me stand up and start talking about anything, or read a book, go to a seminar, or just go to a party and start talking with people, you're going to know immediately where they're coming from. You're going to know whether it's doctrine and dogma, fear-based stuff, or whether it's academia, or just blowing smoke. And there's a lot of folks blowing smoke. Like Lao Tzu said, the world is full of half-enlightened masters. So if you can identify and verify those principles for yourself, I make those promises. And I've enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
So, Jazzy June. Yeah. All right. Well, I must tell you, haven't you heard some beautiful saxophone sounds? Well, the gentleman is energetic, inspiring, smooth, and soulful. Those are the words to describe his music. As a composer and artist, music has taken him all across the country, and even into Canada to perform. Coming from a large family filled with musicians and singers, he knew from an early age that music would be a major part of his future. In 2012, he entered the smooth jazz market with the release of his first project, New Perspective. It was greatly welcomed into the genre. The project received major airplay and appeared on several smooth jazz charts. The project showed his versatility in several genres of music, such as straight-ahead jazz, smooth jazz, gospel, and funk. His second project, Power, Instrumental Praise and Worship, was released March 2018. Based in Memphis, right here in the Memphis area, he has become an in-demand musician and performer, sideman, and music director. He is also a very successful band director with the Shelby County School System. And he will be starting as a new band director at Snowland this fall. Awesome. Cameron has been married for 18 years and has 2 children. Ladies and gentlemen, please give an open heart welcome to Mr. Cameron Ross.
Thank you all. It's an honor and privilege to be here, and I thank Philip for the welcome, for the invite to come. My heart's desire, ever since I picked up the saxophone, was to share God's message through music, and that's pretty much what gives me my pleasure. Thank you all for having me. I'm going to do 2 selections. First one is a jazz standard made famous by Sonny Rollins called St. Thomas, and the second one is from my new CD. It's originally by an artist by the name of Richard Smallwood, but it became famous. If you ever saw the movie The Preacher's Wife with Whitney Houston, it's a song that she did called I Love the Lord, and that'll be the second one that I do. I have both of my CDs here for sale. They're $15. I do take cash and credit cards and all that stuff. Just to let you all know. Thank you so much. St. Thomas.
joining us with What's Going On. There's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know you've got to find a way to bring some love here today. Father, we don't need to escalate. See, war is not the answer. Only love can conquer it. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love here today. Picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Just talk to me so you can see. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Yeah, what's going Mother, everybody thinks we're wrong. Oh, they're just simply because our hair is long. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love here today. Big lights and big signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Just talk to me so you can see. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? What's going on? What's
releasing this breath, knowing that there is only one power and one presence in the universe, and that is God. And as each of us embodies all that we have learned today, we take it in, we make it our own, and we simply live from those very truths. We give thanks for all that have participated today. We give thanks for the lesson, the beautiful music, the affirmative moment, the centering moment, just the beautiful energy that each and every person has brought into this space and into this place today. Moving forward, knowing that there are some rules in this game called life. And when I learn those rules, I can apply those rules to every aspect of my life. I can verify those rules in every aspect of my life. When I've got it all together, I've won the game. So I release, I let go. I let God. So it is.
So it is.